And we are on. Good morning, Jaime. I appreciate you being on. How are you?
I'm well, Alan. How are you?
I'm good. And before we start, I believe it's your birthday or something like that. It's just bad.
It was on Wednesday, but we've been celebrating all week, so we may as well keep the festivities going. It can still be my birthday.
Yeah, it's your birthday week, birthday month.
Yeah,
birthday
that's
year.
it. Season. Virgo
Birthday season.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I always find that hilarious when people post, it's like my birthday month. Like, damn, all right. Well, I guess we're just going to party all month long.
Yeah, I don't have enough wealth or liver to party for 30 days in a row. Yeah, my kidneys and my wallet, my kidneys and my cash are not caught up.
Yeah. It's interesting they say that because like I saw one of your posts, and we're gonna get into this. We're gonna deep parts of this.
Yeah, obviously.
But I really thought about it because I was just in San Antonio for a show, and I was hanging out with Keith, hanging out with a couple of people, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh my God, I am not 25 anymore. I'm not 24. Yeah. I'm not. And it's like, how the hell did I do that? Like, I have no idea. Yeah. And it's just. Oh, that was real life.
The problem is we hang out, we have like a slightly younger friend group. And so they stay out, and then the grandmas who turn into pumpkins at like midnight we're trying to be cool. And we're just not. So Alan, I am happy to go to bed with you at 10 separately, but together whenever we hang out. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. That's, by like 10, by like midnight, I'm just like, all right, let me make sure my food is good. Let me make sure I'm ready to go. But you guys have fun. You guys have all the fun in the world. That's for sure.
Bye.
Are you doing anything like, I noticed like you're at some kind of like a Pride festival or Pride parade-ish kind of a thing, or am I off on this?
Every day is Pride, Alan.
No. Yeah.
The first Sunday of every month, there's a bar and grill in St. Pete that hosts a drag brunch. So about 8 of us went out to, again, extend the birthday celebrations, but also just support drag in Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That is cool. Every day is Pride.
So every day is Pride at our house.
I love that. And you know what? Let's just kind of get into this because what I really love about you, Jaime, and what I really love about when I first interacted with you is when we did the Subculture Live show, big shout out to Sammy real quick. And you bring like a really good energy about you. You bring a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of the things. And especially, I got to thank you on this because I remember when I reached out to you to say, hey, do you want to do this? You took the time to ask, well, hey, Alan, how's your mental health? How is that? And I got to tell you, when you asked me that, I was actually going through some things. So it really meant a lot that you actually asked me about my mental well-being. And first of all, thank you, because that really did mean a lot. And second of all, is that something that you've always been about? Like, where did those kind of things become paramount for you and became something that's like a foundation of who you are?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. It's funny because this morning I had a client come to me, small tangent, who said she's really nervous about her son going off to college, and it's his first year, because she's scared he's not going to make any friends. And I said, I'm going to give you the 2 pieces of advice that my mom gave me on my first day. And she said, bring a full pack of gum every day for the first week. And then whenever you join a group and you introduce yourself, ask if anyone wants gum. And that's going to be your icebreaker. And I was like, yes. And then the second thing she said was just keep asking questions. Just keep asking people, ask them about themselves. Nobody wants anything more than to talk about themselves.
Amen.
So that was, we're talking 18, 19 years old. My mom said the way to make friends is to ask people about themselves. And so I don't necessarily now do it to people please or to try and make friends. I do it because I don't know how I don't know what else to do. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
think there's also something to be said for the lost art of dialogue versus monologue, right? Like, you know me from Instagram, but all I'm doing is talking at you, right? I'm making a story at you. I'm making a reel at you. I'm making a post at you and you're reading it, but it doesn't go both ways. And I think that now when we meet our friends, all we're doing is talking at, because that's all we're used to. And so the lost art of me asking you a question, waiting for a response, and then actively listening and giving a follow up question rather than telling you how the story relates to me is something we don't see a lot anymore.
Hmm. Where do you think that comes from, out of curiosity?
I do think it comes from social media, right? Because again, I'm so used to talking at myself and only seeing myself on the screen. But I also think it just stems from a little bit of anxiety. I think it's
Mm.
almost like overcompensation, right? I'm so anxious and nervous to be in this big group. It's easier to talk about something I know, which is me, than to expand my horizons and find out about you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I've talked to people about that before, exactly what you're saying, where the difference between talking at and talking with, and the difference
Mm.
between listening to respond or listening to comprehend. And there's just so much of that distinction. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think social media plays a huge part in that because, first of all, like, we have our social media, we have our filter set for our social media. We block things that we don't want to hear. We avoid things that we don't want to see, and people think that's just social media, but ultimately it programs us as our humans to do
Yeah.
the same thing in our regular day lives. And it's interesting because for me, in where I'm seeing it more than anything else is in confrontation. And I don't mean that like trying to be confrontational, but like, I'm in a service industry, and as an engineer, and I notice a lot of these professors, a lot of these guys, they like talk at me. And then as soon as they realize like, oh, hey, Alan doesn't play this shit, like, I'm going to talk to you because that's not how you talk to someone. They just like, oh, and they don't know how to, respond. And it's interesting, but that's become so much of the norm. But
Yeah.
like, I was raised under the principle of you treat everybody with respect. Everybody has a difference in perspective, and the more that I, you know, try to become compassionate and empathetic of other people, I realize like everybody has their own narrative. Everybody has
Yeah.
their own perspective, and everybody is technically right just based off of their own thing. And it's just kind of, it's what reality and what right do you want to actually register to, because it's just so different. So everything.
That's it. That's it. And if we took a little more time to comprehend, perhaps my reality could be better. Perhaps I could see things in a different or a newer light. Like, the opportunity to expand your horizons is always in front of you. You just have to ask a good question.
Oh, I love this. Oh, this is why I love talking to you, Jaime. But and this is why I love a lot of your content, because you speak a lot of the things that I love about, which is like reframing, like looking at a thing another way, like looking at things from a manner that would empower you to be a better version of yourself, and handling the situation in a non-destructive manner.
Yeah.
Um, what where did that come from for you? Like, is there any moment, is there anything in your life, or is it where you're just like, oh, hey, this is actually who I am now, or this is the way I want to view things? Like, take me
Yeah.
back into that, Jamie, and let me know where that comes from, please.
So I have to give credit to my parents once again. My father was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease about 8 months before I was born, shortly
Oh,
after my
wow.
parents got married. So I grew up with a father whom I never saw walk, I never heard speak, couldn't give me a hug, but he was a judge of the Superior Court of Ontario. And he gave so many motivational speeches all over Ontario. We were carted around like royalty. And again, this was a gentleman who, very similar, picture Stephen Hawking, because they had the same thing. He used a myoelectric switch in his forehead to go letter by letter to determine the next thing he was going to say. But one of his favorite quotes, like if this man had a tattoo on his body, it would have been, rather than curse the darkness, I choose to light a candle.
Mm. Oh, I got goosebumps. Whoa.
Oh, right. So that, I mean, wait, Alan, that's the superficial. That's my dad. My mom was the product of two Holocaust survivors. My grandmother escaped a concentration camp in Germany, but not only did she escape, she liberated her brother and her husband from the men's work camp. And all three of them escaped Nazi Germany to come to Canada to start a life for themselves. My mom and her sister were born in a DP camp, a displaced persons camp in Germany. They came to Canada, made names for themselves. My aunt was the first Jewish female on the Supreme Court of Canada. I don't know how not to overcome. Like the idea of not making the most of my circumstances, I believe is in my blood.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was not expecting all that, Jaime. I'm not
That's where that comes from.
Yeah. How do you not become, why do you not, I mean, how do you not have a resilient mindset after everything? Like you're literally, it's in your DNA to be resilient and to overcome.
Yeah. And my dad used to go to all of my elementary school baseball games or my elementary school basketball games. And then I would play softball on the weekend and he would show up. And then it was funny because if any of like the girls got injured or they were like faking it or they didn't get game time, so they started crying, all of their parents would be like, look at Judge Filer. Judge Filer showed up. Do you think you could show up? And I was like, oh, fine. So they'd use my dad, but it was true, right? Like Judge Filer came to all the games. Why can't you play?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so then would you say that's just kind of how you've always been then? You've always just been like, hey, like I don't want to say like suck it up, but like, hey, like there's always so that kind of just carried out through your entire childhood into adulthood, the whole 9 yards. Like
yeah, and I wouldn't say it's suck it up because I think there's some danger in suck it up that could lead to definitely some physical and emotional harm. It's more like there's got to be a workaround. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to slam my head into a wall if I want to get to the other side. I'm going to figure out how to get around. Am I going to go over it? Maybe if it's not too tall, if I'm strong enough, maybe I could go around it. Maybe I could ask a friend to give me a boost, right? Like I'm not just going to push through, go, it's hard and it's meant to be hard, hustle, grind. No, I'm going to take the smarter way to get through.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I really appreciate that you acknowledge that. And you know, I'm glad you corrected me on that because you're correct, right? Like, I know that, you know, I was raised under the narrative or I don't want to say, I would say I was. And a lot of industries that I was in, like the Navy, suck it up, go through. But, you know, like if you're emotionally feeling a certain way, it's not invalid, you know, but just like kind of what you said, there's always, you don't have to approach it in a suck it up. You can acknowledge it and handle that emotion in a different way. And another thing that I really do appreciate about your Instagram, your social media, and who you are as your message is just that. Is like you don't invalidate your emotions, but you can approach it a little bit differently. Like, and I think it's really interesting because I don't think people are aware of that feeling or aware of being able to handle their emotions or acknowledge the emotions and not act out of them. For you, where does that emotional intelligence and where did that kind of concept come from in that dynamic?
I think it definitely comes from being, well, I'm an only child from my parents' marriage, but I have three older siblings who are 21, 23, and 25 years older than I am.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I feel like I always had not just a higher standard to live up to. 2 out of those 3 siblings are doctors with their own practices. And of course, I just told you the stories about my parents, but I felt like I almost, maybe I did this to myself. I had a responsibility to grow up before I needed to. Also, we can totally get into this later, but I kind of deprived myself of a childhood by having an eating disorder. I robbed myself of about 10 of my formative years from 11 to 21. So I think I just kind of leapfrogged teenage angst. We started off this podcast talking about drinking. I never got into it because of my eating disorder. So I think I also always knew what I was going to do when I grew up. So I surrounded myself with mentors, people who were smarter than me and textbooks. A, to not have to answer questions about my eating disorder. B, because I was hospitalized, there wasn't a whole lot for me to do but learn and read and grow. And also because I knew I was going to be a personal trainer, I think I just had a natural affinity for self-development because I didn't want anyone to go to any other resource but me. I wanted to be the end all be all for my clients, being able to provide emotional, spiritual support, of course, the physical component. So I had to amass as much knowledge and emotional intelligence as I could in order to be able to serve.
Wow. Wow. And you're 100% right, because I think we're starting to become more aware that physical trainers isn't just about do 3 sets of 5 reps and then go eat this, go eat that. Like you just said, there's way more psychological, emotional things that are behind our habits and our behaviors or the lack thereof. And is the fact that you can acknowledge that. But yeah, you know what, let's talk about this eating disorder, if you don't mind me asking about it. So what was that eating disorder? What was that like? And then can you kind of take me into what that was like for you during that time?
So I remember, and again, I've had therapy, I've gone through it, I'm fully recovered now, but you could ask my mom and she would have one reason based on what she may have heard or her assumptions as a psychotherapist. You could ask my social worker, you could ask, and it would have started for different reasons, but I believe, I didn't want the attention on me. It was the classic, right? I want to disappear physically so that my mom could focus on my dad who was ill, my grandmother who had Alzheimer's and her own life. And I just will be this good little kid that doesn't do anything and just kind of shrinks herself, right? So by physically getting smaller, my presence wasn't as big. Now, of course, this backfired tremendously because I almost killed myself. But it really just started with Richard Simmons videos. When my parents would leave the house, I would put them on loop, and I would literally sweat to the oldies, but in an obsessive way. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats when my parents would leave the house again, or at night after they would go to bed. And then once I got to high school, I started skipping class, bringing my rollerblades to school because the Jewish Community Center was around the block from my high school. So during free period or even the period after, if I didn't want to go to school, I would spend extra hours swimming, lifting weights, running on the treadmill. And then it reached its apex at 15, 16. I was hospitalized for 40 days as an inpatient. Morning through night. Then 2 months as an outpatient. So your whomever drops you off before breakfast and you have to stay until the end of dinner. You go to school, there's group therapy, there's individual therapy. And then the second time, I believe I was 17 or 18, and I was put on kidney dialysis for 48 hours because I had shut down my kidneys, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, go ahead.
So were you just over exercising and under eating, kind of that's kind of the gist I'm getting that?
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. But enough that I still had the brain power to graduate with honors. I got into a great school, got into the program that I wanted to because I had the GPA that they needed. I was still able to play varsity basketball. Now, of course, I was not able to travel with the team because my doctor didn't give me medical clearance. So I definitely lived a life of lies. I think because I would have to explain. And now, of course, everyone knew when you're walking around at 5'7", 5'8", and 104 pounds, people know that it's not you're just not eating. That's it. But of course, I was trying to hide it. I was in denial. I was a little bit ashamed, a little bit embarrassed because at that point, it took control over me. It was no longer about me controlling my food. My food was officially, the exercise was officially in control of me. I didn't have a choice, very ill. And it took about 4 to 5 years after the kidney dialysis for me to actually accept help and recover.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you got admitted, is there, was that the kind of awakening for you? Was that oh, holy crap, this is kind of going really far? Is that the moment that you kind of knew it was at an extreme point?
You definitely would think that because I was robbed of the last 2 months of 11th grade and then the summer between 11th and 12th when you're supposed to hang out with your friends. But unfortunately, it was, man, my parents are awful human beings for putting me in the hospital and, again, denying me my senior year, the summer before senior year. Who are they? Just wait till I get out and I'll show them.
Wow.
So things got worse after my hospitalization because I was so angry with my parents for saving my life.
Oh, jeez. That's kind of, we alluded to earlier, your mindset and your approach to that kind of just changes everything in the dynamic of, and the fact that you can see it now from this perspective is amazing. The fact that you're like, oh my God, thank God that you guys did that for me. Like, like that's, there's a quote that I always default back to, and I really default back to it now as a parent of two teenage daughters, right? Which is, the older I get, the wiser my parents become. And I realize more and more like that. You remember that time when I threw a tantrum when I was 12? I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was doing.
Oh my God, so dumb.
Another thing that I really want to highlight is the fact that, you just said your grades are good, you're doing well in your community, but you were still kind of going through this. And I feel like that's like, it's so exemplary. It's like such an example of how, when people are still doing great things, that they still can be going through something internally, regardless of the fact that they project something of success or project confidence, project whatever, but that's just a projection. And sometimes, internally, they could just be going through something else. Like, and now I would say, like, did that experience carry over now into how you're training people, how you're helping people become better versions of themselves? Like, did that personal experience definitely carry over?
In terms of my professional life, it is the reason that I don't like to work with competitors. Because I've heard the saying, if you don't have an eating disorder already, bodybuilding will give you one. But chances are you got into bodybuilding because something is not right with your body image, your relationship to the scale, your relationship with food. And this is your way of personifying it or amplifying it. And I don't, obviously it is so outside of my scope to help someone who has an eating disorder that I won't take a client who comes to me with one. And I also don't want to be part of the problem. So professionally, it's definitely impacted me. Personally, it's another one of those things where people, they see what I look like now, or they see the life that I have now, and they're like, yeah, must be nice to like have always had that build. And I was like, why don't I show you my before photos? Nobody wants to look like that, right? Like, yeah. So I like that I have little, what would you call it? Well-traveled luggage, Alan, is not free of bumps and nicks, right? Right? You don't want to see pristine luggage because it means that it's never been anywhere. It hasn't seen the world. I like my luggage to like be missing a wheel and to have like shit carved out of it, right? So I see these things that have happened for me as just, this is my journey through life. This is me traveling and navigating things through life.
Wow. Oh, Jaime, I love this entire conversation with you. Seriously, this is why I love talking to you. Well-traveled luggage. I'm going to use that from here on out. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well-traveled luggage isn't pretty.
No, yeah, I agree. All right. So I definitely did some Instagram creeping on a lot of things. Nice. And I definitely love, because that's my research, right? I get to Instagram creep. Of course. It is what it is. You talked about, like, we kind of talked about, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? You spoke about a moment in your life where you're kind of like doing a lot of drugs, doing a lot of, it seemed like an interesting period of that, like substances and whatnot. I relate to that really hard, but I mean, let's talk about that. Like, what was that like for you? If you can kind of depict what that was like what were the things that you were doing? Where were you at, like mentally, emotionally? Can we, do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we started off this conversation by talking about liquor. I to this day will only drink if like it has to be my best friend getting married. Like I won't even drink at a wedding. It's got to be my best friend. And at this point, it's got nothing to do with the calories. I just never developed a taste for it. I think because I didn't, right? Like when it was cool, and unless it's a pina colada, a daiquiri, one of those machines in Vegas that like spits out slushies, I don't drink. But
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that like it's just hard to be sober. Like it's hard to be sober after 11 p.m. So I wouldn't say that I abused. There was substance use, and I think it was almost more peer pressure. No, not that anyone made me, right? Because if they were going to peer pressure me, they would have peer pressured me to drink. It was more like, man, I see all these people having a good time, and this is what they're doing. Maybe I could have a better time if that's what I was doing. Now, again, I have to take things a little bit too far. But again, like I wouldn't say that I was an abuser at all. And I don't think Katie would say that. I don't think my friends would say that. But I also just learned that I don't like my mind being altered. I don't, and this could go back to control, and we can break this down, but we don't have to, because again, I'm not a type A. Things don't have to be perfect. I just like being in control. And if you go above a certain level of anything, whether it's food, sex, drugs, alcohol, you're no longer in control.
Yeah. Control. That's you know what's so crazy about that? For me, and I'll be fully transparent on here. It's like, so I remember when before I got into bodybuilding, one of my favorite hobbies was poker. And in the poker world, there is a lot of degeneracy in its entirety. And you add that with me living in Vegas, and the degeneracy is amplified tenfold. And I remember I got into a lot of substances. I got, specifically, I got into a lot of coke. Coke and drinking go synonymous with one another. Yeah. And I remember I would tell myself I had control. I would tell myself I have this all, whatever. But then I remember there was a time, I just was telling my buddy about this yesterday. There was a girl that I was like head over heels for, and she I was the guy at the party that would always have a bag, always do this, that, and the other. I'd be, oh, hey, Alan's here, this, and this. And this girl I really, really was into, she goes, Alan, I like you, but you do too much of this. And it's like, whoa. Yeah. And it hit me so hard because I thought I had control. I thought I wasn't, in a different mindset when these things happen. But as I look at it now, and I look at that version of me, I'm like, holy shit, I was out of hand. I definitely was at a point where I didn't, but I told myself I had control. I told myself I had this. Right. But then I really
could stop if I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would be saying. But then it's like, wait a minute, I'm out partying till 5 a.m. I'm out partying till 11 the next day. I remember like the parties I was involved with, the things that people were doing, and me trying to act like I'm better than that. But in all reality, I'm there. So how am I any different? So the fact that it's, man, it's a very interesting thing. And it's just, thank God I'm on this end of it. But it took a lot of work and a lot of self-realization to be like, man, I am putting myself through this. So the fact that, and now I realize the difference between what really control is and what control really isn't.
Yeah.
And I do try to check in with myself to be like, man, is this really what I should be doing?
Yeah. So, yeah. I love that. I appreciate that perspective. And similar to your story, sometimes it takes someone else intervening, especially someone else you really care about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Real quick, I also saw that you had an engagement that you called off in 2016 because you made a post about that.
Yeah.
Can you, so what was that like, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I had 2 engagements that I called off. One in 2014 to a gentleman who was, he was amazing. He was my best friend. He would have made the ultimate husband, but in the end, for obvious reasons now, we weren't compatible. So it did end amicably. I say that, but if like he was heartbroken. But I said, listen, I kind of have to explore. I think something is going on. I need to figure this out. And he's like, who am I to get in the way of Jaime Flier and her happiness? And I'm like, said, okay. Yeah. So we held hands and we kissed goodbye, and that was it. And he's happily married with kids now. 2016. So I had started dating. I came out a little bit later in life. I started dating people. I fell in love with my first girlfriend. Turns out she had a fiance though. So that was doomed from the beginning. And I immediately, rather than taking time to date other people, maybe even grieve the relationship, I immediately jumped into another one. Now, this was with a fantastic human. So it was great and it was fun and we were super compatible and my friends liked her. But I mean, it's like when you let a kid out into a playground and you said, okay, here's the entire playground, but you can only play on the slide. You can only go up and down. And you're like, do you see everything else? Like there's there are some swings and there's this pole and I want to touch the spider web and crawl on the cargo net, right? So I did that to myself. I said, there's an entire playground, but you are only going to go up and down the slide. So 12 months of the slide was fine, but in and about the 1 year mark, I started cheating. And I'm open about this, and obviously she and I have discussed it since. But I went on a rampage, Alan. There's no other word. You want to talk addiction? I would almost say that I was more addicted to sex or dating other people. It wasn't even dating. No, there was no dating because I essentially had a girlfriend and who became my fiance. I think I was addicted. Well, first of all, it felt good. Right? Because this was my first time. I was exploring my sexuality. I was addicted to the attention because, if one is good, more is better. So 4 people fawning over me rather than just one does wonders for me. I was addicted to the travel, right? I would go all over the US to see them. And that is what ultimately, again, you have to hit rock bottom. I ended up confronting her, completely shattered another human life. Again, she is now married, has 2 kids, like is doing exceptionally well. But I was like, what are you doing? Because again, I was like, I could stop if I wanted to, right? Especially because you have someone at home waiting for you, right? And if you're drinking or you have an eating disorder, like you're hurting yourself, not that that's okay, but there's still only one person involved. When you're cheating, essentially you're hurting 3 people, right? So yeah, it took me, I cheated for 14 months before I came clean with her. And it was a week after we got engaged, and we got engaged at the Olympia, and I cheated with her. I cheated on her the day before she came to Las Vegas. And I was like, okay, hey, it's like the final meal before prep starts. But it wasn't. I did it one more time after we got back, and I said, she deserves better. I might not. I may live a life of a bachelor who just never settles down. Funny enough, so I have a ring on my ring. I have a diamond on my ring finger. And everyone's like, oh, like when you met Katie, is that when you got the diamond? And I said, no. As soon as I broke off my second engagement, I got it to remind myself that you have to stop pushing it. The right person will come into your life when they're meant to, but you cannot keep forcing this to happen because look what you do. Wow. So that is that story.
Wow. Yeah. I gotta tell you, that's surprising to hear considering how the vibe that you and Katie have. It is so fucking awesome. And it's like, I'm genuinely surprised. So what was that work like, in between, what you just said, kind of being promiscuous, being, addicted to that attention to now this happy relationship with, because I got to tell you, it seems like you and Katie have been together forever. That's the vibe it feels like.
I know, right?
And I love seeing your guys' post. It is so fucking cute. And I hate using that word right now, but there's no other fucking way to say it. You guys are fucking cute as hell. Seriously. So
thank you.
But what was that like? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you can relate to this, right? Like, why did you use Coke? What void were you filling?
You're right. You're right.
What were
It
you
was.
missing? Because if you wanted energy, Alan, you'd have a Monster or even a Four Loco. But Coke is different,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like nobody just has it a little bit because they need an amphetamine, right?
Yeah.
There's something there. So it wasn't sex. I'm not addicted to sex. It was, what void is the woman filling? And is there perhaps a more suitable alternative that doesn't get anyone in trouble, that you can use to feel better about yourself? But also, why don't you feel good about yourself? Where is this even coming from? So there was a lot of deep work that had to be done, right? I had to analyze my finances and say, Jaime, you're fine, right? You have a roof over your head. You can afford to travel to all these places. You're not hurting. These women aren't feeling right. Okay, you look good. You are not a total troll, right? There's at least several people who have wanted to marry you. You're doing quite well in the looks department. You're smart. You have a great job. You have, right? And I went through every area, like brain, bank, body, and being. Those are kind of my 4 categories. And I was like, what do you feel like you're missing? And it was essentially, because it always goes back to attention from your childhood, right? Right? Your parents were busy. My therapist figured out, it was just like, you didn't get attention because there was literally no bandwidth to give you attention. Your parents did the best they could, but like your dad wasn't, he was there, but he wasn't. And your mom did her best, but she had like a terminally ill husband. So you were not the focus. Can you just give yourself the attention? Can you prioritize your self-care a little bit more? And then as soon as I did that, and I started coming into my own and just wearing everything about me with a badge of honor and essentially giving myself the attention, it all fall into place. And that's when of course, as it happens, Katie came into my life, but I had to be complete first.
Wow. Yeah, there's that I heard something recently that does kind of what you're just saying, which is like, don't go and try to chase the butterfly, but rather create a garden for the butterfly to feel comfortable in.
Oh yeah.
And
I love that.
right. And that's
Yes.
exactly what you're saying. And I think you're so right on, because I feel like a lot of people right now, they don't notice that they're doing it, but they're using other people to fill that void, fill this or fill that, effectively like a substance. Like, it doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be Coke. Sometimes it's people that we are using to stimulate something that we haven't worked through. And wow, the fact that you can acknowledge that, work through that, and that inner child work that we're talking about, that's that we're saying real quickly. Like, do you mind if I share the story real quick? This inner child work story. So anyways, all right. So a lot of what my transformation came from, and a lot of things that you just acknowledged, it was a couple of years ago. I found this like adoption paperwork for myself, because I am adopted, and in the paperwork was a bunch of psychiatry notes from the lady, and she was just all like, Alan does this because of that, Alan does because of this, and it documented how my birth father was, my birth grandfather was, and even though I had never really was raised by them, like I got abandoned when I was like 4 or 5, and I went into foster care. But a lot of my adult behaviors were paralleling exactly what they were doing. And so the whole nature versus nurture thing is fucking nuts, right? And so I remember this moment in like 2020 where I'm like, dude, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to stop doing the substances, stop drinking so damn much. And I went through this entire transformation. I went through my first bodybuilding competition, ran a marathon, started doing all these things. And after that, I went to Tulum. So I'm a February 22nd baby, 222. Last year, in the year 2022, 222 fell on a Tuesday, right?
Wow.
And then to add that synchronicity, I went to Tulum, right? But that's not the craziest thing, right? I forced that synchronicity. But when I was there, my buddy had his aunt there, right? And I told her this entire thing. I found my child repair, started doing the work, started realizing that, the commonality of all my problems was me. So I needed to work on myself. And then she's like, oh, you mean inner child work? I'm like, yeah. How do you know about that? She's like, look up my name, right? Her name is Catherine Taylor. I look up her name, and I shit you not, Jaime, she is the pioneer of inner child work. She has books in the early 90s. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? And she just spoke about all of her things that she worked through, how she started recognizing these things. And then she was so elated that I had found it all on my own. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, you're the reason why my life is saved and transformed.
That's insane.
Wow. It was nuts. And then not to make things somber, but I made a lot of promises to her about my brand, about my podcast, sharing my story. And then a little bit after that, she actually she passed, unfortunately. But, and not to make that somber, but I really do feel like I made that promise to her. And everything I do now is to live up to that promise because of what she was able to do, and so when I meet people like you and I talk about these things that are so open about their entire experiences, right? Because even though it's like inner child work, it's not always just things from my childhood. There are different instances that relate to our emotional intelligence, our emotional central, everything, and it plays out in different ways. So, man, that's.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I will.
Thank you.
There's oh my God. Wow. That also explains so much about you because this is so interesting, Alan. Okay. So you have a carrot. You have a carrot that you keep chasing, but you'll never catch because unfortunately she's passed. So you will never know if you're making her proud or doing her inner child work justice. Mm. And that's a heavy burden to carry. But on the other hand, it's a never ending journey for you. My life is dedicated to making my dad proud, which is something I will never achieve because until I meet him at Heaven's Gate, I have no idea. Like I can say, no, like obviously like I'm not a shitty human. But that's not the point. The point is I will not hear it from him until my end of days. So I'm totally in line with like having a carrot that you will never catch.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. That's man. So what is that? Is that like an internal motor that just never stops for you? Like I'm curious as now, because now you're right. That is actually, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that about myself, but you're right. Damn. Do you want to be my personal trainer at this point too? Like, all right. Jeez.
You are not a lesbian with anxiety. So alas, my friend.
I mean, why can't I identify as a lesbian with anxiety? Like, is that something?
You can. We have another coach, but
right. But yeah, please.
my dad was a very spiritual man. We come from I think his father was a rabbi or his grandfather was a rabbi, and he studied with a rabbi 2 days a week. Now my brother studies with a rabbi. It's very cute. So one of his favorite passages from a book called Ethics of Our Fathers goes, "You are not obligated to complete the task, nor are you free to desist from it." Yeah. Right. So you have to have your life's work, and it might never be done, right? Like I'm continuing on, but I don't know if I'll ever finish it. Yeah. But we just don't stop. You're not allowed to desist from it.
Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like that just evolves over time, and that evolves the more that we go into it. And, a lot of things that we're talking about, I'm trying to instill into my children now. And, and a lot of the reason why I have this podcast is because I want my future generations to hear the work that I had to go through and the things that we, the messages that we spread out, because you're right. This never really just stops. It just continues to evolve and, chasing after a higher version of ourselves. I mean, would really say what's the highest version of ourselves that's just capped? Like that doesn't really exist, but that's okay, and that's okay to constantly go after that,
I would rather have something I'm constantly chasing than live a life of I'm just existing. Yeah.
I have never gotten so many goosebumps in one freaking recording. Like you got it.
Hey,
But you know,
hey, yeah.
but this is what I expected with you. Honestly, it's unexpected, but it is expected at the same time.
Yeah, I did not disappoint. Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
didn't. You didn't. All right. So I got to ask, because we do talk about natural bodybuilding and the whole nine
Oh
yards.
yeah, we should probably
talk about
address that. Yeah.
45 minutes into it, we're like, oh yeah, we should talk about bodybuilding, some dynamic.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting because I didn't expect for you to say earlier, you say you don't work with competitors, but you are a competitor yourself.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about that real quickly. So because now, wait, you only do CrossFit things now, or do you still like compete in bodybuilding as well? Like
this year, so 2023 is all CrossFit into maybe the first quarter of 2024. And then my coach and I will game plan what the 2024 season will look like for bodybuilding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what class do you compete in, by the way?
So women's physique for those that have it, women's bodybuilding for those that have it.
That have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you know what, I really appreciate you because you have a really good balance of like a masculine and a feminine energy. And it's interesting because it's just you. There's no like, you know what I mean? Because I know we're really quick to label a presence and an energy, and I'll be really, I'm going to admit this right now. Like I kind of did say that, like just masculine, fun. Like, well, no, that why am I labeling it in one dynamic or another? It's just who you are as a person. Yeah. And so how I don't want to say how is that for you, but like is there, I don't know, is there like a labeling sometimes that you experience? Is there certain things that you kind of have to break through in that dynamic?
Sure. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I was nervous. You know, when I won my pro card at Yenny Rodriguez's show in the Tampa 2021 Natural. I was the only girl with short hair, and I was the most shredded, and I had a hard physique. And I have an affinity for getting lean versus putting on muscle, as just the way my genetics lean. And I was like, I hope they like it because this is all I've got. And I think regardless of how you present, and this is really a life lesson, how big or small you are, how tall or short you are, masculine, feminine energy, the spectrum of brown to white skin, as long as you wear it authentically, people are going to be okay with you. It's when you come at people aggressively with your masculinity or femininity. It's when you come at them aggressively with your white privilege or whatever it is. Then they're like, 1 second, this is now hostile. But I mean, physique is open fingers. I have a great smile, right? So I wore my masculinity as authentically as I could, and it was a physique that was rewarded. And that's it. So I don't think it's hurt me because I'm not embarrassed by it. And I wouldn't grow my hair out because the judges said I might win a division in another, right? Like it just wouldn't be me.
Wow. And you know what? I didn't realize that, but I would imagine there is a challenge in the bodybuilding, you know, competitive journey where, you know, obviously we are judged off of a criteria of a standard that's kind of written or unwritten per se. And that can go against what we identify ourselves as such. So that lack there of congruency sometimes could probably play in your psyche, and the fact that you were like, no, I'm just going to be my authentic self, and that is it, is really, I would say that that's actually more of an exception than not in our community. And I could see where that's a huge challenge. Like,
well, because again, typically in bodybuilding, there's some level of insecurity there, right? Or there's some need for approval there. But again, similar to you creating the garden and waiting for the butterfly, if you step on stage and you truly believe that regardless of the outcome, I am the winner, then it doesn't matter. You will present your authentic self. So let's say, I don't know, switch it up in 2024 and I try figure because maybe I'm just too small for physique. Why not? Like I would find a way to make myself or just show up as a feminine version of what you see before you in order to do well in figure. And that's it. And it wouldn't be any different and it wouldn't look any different. I would just change it up a little bit.
Wow. And so where did this start transitioning over to CrossFit and then competing in CrossFit instead of bodybuilding?
So it came, I discovered CrossFit in 2016. So I've been bodybuilding since 2004. That was my first show. I was 17. Again, it plays into the eating disorder. I was shredded. I thought my body dysmorphia wasn't, I was 104 pounds, but in my head I was 204. So I had to like keep losing weight. I was 104, but I saw like 200, but of lean muscle. Like I thought legitimately, and it's funny now that I have short hair, I didn't then, but like I thought I looked like Bob Paris. I thought I looked like Lee Labrada. I thought I looked like just one of the smaller, more aesthetic bodybuilders. So I started competing. And that's it. And I fell in love with the sport. But then obviously I had to take some time away. It was no longer healthy for me mentally or physically. So I got back on stage took up CrossFit, tore my ACL playing basketball, freak accident, could no longer do CrossFit or play basketball. So I was like, well, I'll go back to the non-athletic sport of bodybuilding where it doesn't actually matter if you have an ACL or not. Yeah, so
you're not wrong.
Nobody be offended. Nobody be offended.
No, it's you're right. Honestly, I hate to say it, but you're right.
You don't have to do box jumps or like a split jerk to do well in a bodybuilding show. So I said, okay, like I haven't competed since 2012, but this is a good way for me to get back into it because I still like being competitive. I just couldn't jump or do wall balls or anything with impact. So I competed in 2016, fell in love, recovered from my injury, back to CrossFit, 2018, 2019, back to bodybuilding, 2020, COVID, sorry. So more CrossFit in 2020, bodybuilding 2021 and 2022, 2023 back to CrossFit. So it's just always been a dance of, I love being competitive and pushing myself to the brink, but I also know that for me, it is hard. And this is my personal background. It's hard to justify eating 3,000 calories just to lift heavier. So that next time I diet, maybe I'll have 2 pounds more muscle as a natural competitor. If I'm going to eat 3,000 calories, you better believe it's going to be the fuel that's going to get me a bar muscle up and a legless rope climb and like a 1 minute, 30 second, 400 meter run. Like that's what I want to fuel. I don't just want to fuel big muscles for the sake of adding 2 pounds.
I was just going to ask you about that. Like what's the difference, and I guess in eating between both of them? I guess you're kind of highlighting it where it seems like CrossFit, you're eating with the purpose to perform, and bodybuilding seems like you're eating not exactly to perform, but for an aesthetic. So would you say that's kind of like accurate on the difference between eating between both of those?
Absolutely. And I mean, I've seen it in, my competitor friends where even if they stay on their macros in the off season, their macros include cookies, ice cream, going out to eat, which may or may not affect their bench press and lateral raises the next day. But if I have cookies, ice cream, or going out to eat, you better believe that whatever WOD I try and tackle that's requiring a 90% effort output, that fuel is not doing me any good. So the 3,000 calories is going to look very different relative to performance. And there's also no off season or on season, right? I live in Florida. Competitions can happen whenever. So it's not like, as soon as I have a competition on the radar, those 3,000 calories become clean. Like, I'm in contest prep. Now I'm eating clean. No. If I want like a Ferrari, Porsche, a Maserati, it burns clean fuel, right? I'm not a Honda Civic with regular unleaded. Like I need that premium.
Sorry, I just thought about the Honda Civics with the ginormous spoilers for no absurd reason.
No reason. Doesn't need to happen. I don't know why. You can hear them coming a mile away.
Oh my God,
it's unnecessary.
The ridiculously huge exhaust and everything like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, why? I don't know.
Why?
Yeah, what's funny too? Do you remember when the spinners were around?
Yes, of course.
And I remember when when Walmart used to sell their little spinners, so I used to see like Chevy Astro vans and like, like just ridiculous unnecessary things.
You're not cool.
You're not,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but you're 100% right. Where, yeah, I guess you would never fuel a Ferrari or Porsche with bad fuel, and then you would go on to that. But I never really thought of it that way too, because I remember when I played sports. You're right. I wouldn't be able to if I ate fast food the night before. The day after I'd perform, and it would just feel like shit. But in bodybuilding, you might feel like shit, but it really doesn't affect your lifts. And as long as it's within your macros, it does definitely. Yeah, it
Yes.
doesn't. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To go along with the eating, I saw a recent post of yours that really, I don't want to say made me feel good, but I'm glad you brought awareness to it, which was you had a month of where you didn't track your macros like aggressively,
Yeah.
and you gained like maybe like a pound or so, and everything. Like, what was the intention of what was the message, and what were you trying to display with that?
So I do get a lot of clients who come to me, and again, please remember my clientele struggles with anxiety. They struggle with overwhelm, stress. So teaching them how to track macros is, again, it's just adding to their overwhelm. And the first question, even almost before they learn how to track, is, do I have to track forever? And I need to show them that the answer is no. But the reason I can take time off from tracking, and if I never wanted to go back to it, I wouldn't have to, is because I spent 3 years doing the work, 5 years doing the work, right? I went through the intense periods from bodybuilding where I was in a deficit and making sure that I was hitting those macros. And then the intense periods in my off season, my recovery diet, CrossFit season, where I was hard on the macros to put the weight back on in a healthy way. So I want to show people that macro tracking is a tool, but we don't always walk around with our hammer in our hand. We walk around with a hammer when there's a job to go do, right? We use it when we need it. But if you're good and you're in a maintenance phase, and if body composition, and if you're doing great, then you don't need it. So as an experiment also psychologically, can I give up control? Can I say I don't need my Fitness Pal? Can I not weigh my oatmeal in the morning, or my egg whites, or the chicken on my salad? Can I do that and still feel okay with my life?
Wow.
Yeah.
Do a lot of your clients or the people that approach you advice, do they have that anxiety? Like, would you say like the control aspect of it is like the main catalyst for the anxiety?
I would, but it's not in regards to their food. It would be in regards to perhaps workaholism, right? They're not great at setting boundaries with work, right? They think they're in control of their work, but in reality, their work is in control of them, or their relationships, or their overbearing parents that need to just let their kids kid.
Wow.
So no, the majority of my clients don't come to me struggling with, too much control over their food. It's too much control in other areas of their life, which results in a lack of self-care in something else.
Wow.
Where there's a deficit in something else.
Wow. So, okay. So do they usually, I'm curious, is it like, do they go with you with like a weight issue and you kind of work with them and you kind of point out, hey, it's actually these other things that are the bigger issue? Is that kind of like the evolution of your work?
I would say, I would almost say it's 50-50, and I love it. So you said physical training, but I prefer personal trainer, because I determine on our compatibility call whether they need more person or more trainer first.
Okay.
Right? So the first 3 months might be a little bit more devoted to the psychology. Why do you eat those foods? Or why do you eat those foods at that time? Have you tried taking a bubble bath? Because again, I think you're just using the food because you're exhausted and underappreciated after you get home from work, and food makes, right? It's the dopamine. Or there are people who are just 50 pounds overweight, high fasting glucose levels, H1C levels, etc. They need the trainer first. And then we can talk about, well, how did you get 50 pounds overweight in the first place? What's the problem, right? So there's almost like a triage of what's the bigger problem right now. And then we spend the first 6, 8, 12 weeks working on that. And then the back end, is essentially whichever one we didn't do. Okay, great. Now that we've managed to get your sleep up and your stress down, now we can start talking about macros. And that might be 16 weeks into working with me. But the habits and the lifestyle wasn't there first, which is the most important.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a lot of these people don't even, not a lot of these people, but I mean, does that evolution for them, does that awareness all of a sudden for them become an aha moment because they start talking to you about these things? Or like how?
Yeah.
I can only imagine. Wow.
So the guy that I first got a business mentorship with has a module called the 7 layers of why. And he essentially teaches it as you're a toddler and you're trying to get to the reason behind why the sky is blue. Well, what do? You just keep asking why, right? The sky is blue because it's a reflection of the water, but why, right? I want to lose 20 pounds, but why? Because I don't fit in my pants, but you could buy bigger pants. That's an option. Why is it important for you to fit in your pants? Well, because I don't feel good in my skin in general. I was like, okay. A lot of people, you could go through your life not feeling. Why is that important to you? Well, because it affects the way I show up in my relationships and work. And I said, okay. And then, so again, people get divorced, people fight with their significant others. Why do you want to show up in your relationships better? Well, because I saw my parents, my mom was always fighting and talking about dieting and this and that, and it made my dad, and they didn't have a great relationship. So I want to end up like my parents. Okay. You want to lose 20 pounds because you don't want to end up like your parents, not because you want to fit in a pair of pants. So that's how that happens.
Yeah, that's my God, Jaime, I appreciate you. This is awesome. Yeah, because you're right. Because you know, I know that right now there's a lot of insecurity that's going on along amongst young men right now. And they think that by lifting weights, it's like, oh, I'm going to get secure now. I'm going to finally do that. And just like what you said, it's like, it's not about the weights. It's not about the physique. It's about why you think you need this physique to feel some certain way about yourself. And you got to keep asking yourself why. And Matt, I can imagine this, the impact you're making on people's lives, Jaime. It's amazing. I mean,
I'm certainly trying.
Oh, I think you're certainly doing, my friend. I think you're definitely doing. I mean, hell, I had an epiphany just by talking to you in this hour. Like, oh my God, this carrot. I realized
amazing.
It is. Oh my God. Jaime, I definitely appreciate your time. Is there any Instagram handles, anything that, how can someone want to reach out to you, to either work with you or get another carrot of their own from your amazing, self?
The best way to get in touch with me is on Instagram. I am at JAIM and then the number 91. So Jaime 91, but you can also email me, JaimeFlierFitness@gmail.com.
Outstanding. And any last thing, Jaime? I really appreciate this, by the way. Seriously, I do.
Yeah, I would say do the hard work because, you know, in bodybuilding, we say, what do we say? We say that the pain of discipline isn't as bad as the pain of regret. The pain of not moving forward in your life and actualizing your potential will be worse than the pain of doing the deep work right now. To not be who you should have been all along will hurt you more than uncovering your inner child and doing that work tomorrow.
Mic drop.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for joining my therapy session. And
yeah.
Oh my God!
Hope you enjoyed the 6.5 minutes of bodybuilding, the 60 minutes of life building.
Yeah, but I mean, I knew that's what this is going to be. I knew that we were going to talk more about life and these things because that's what I really connected with you on. But like I said, Jaime, please stay on for a little bit after this, and for everybody that tuned in. I hope you gained just as much as I did throughout this entire time talking to you. And Jaime, thank you so much, seriously, for being here.
I appreciate you having me on, Alan. I mean, clearly we have more to talk about, so you let me know when we're doing a part 2.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe we'll talk about bodybuilding. I don't know.
I don't. We might finally talk about it.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much. And until next time, deuce. Wow.